Hello and welcome to Chats, a television podcast, Season 6, Chatzylon 5. Okay. My brain ran out of steam. Let's do another
You got this, bro.
You
got this, dude.
They farted right out of there. Okay.
You got this, bro.
Take 2, 3. Hello and welcome. Oh, okay. We're good. This is good. 3, 2.
Yeah.
Shush! Stab you with a dinner fork, politely. 3.
Yeah, dude. Stab
2, 3, 2.
1.
Oh my god. Do you want to host it?
Just let me drink my water. Sorry.
Okay. The big sippy.
Oh yeah.
Oh my god.
That's good shit.
Okay.
All right, I'm ready.
Hello. Whoop. Hello is not the countdown. Hello and welcome. Come on. Yikes.
Okay.
3, 2.
It was the dawn of the third age of mankind, 10 years after the Earth-Minbari War. The Babylon Project was a dream given form. Its goal, to prevent another war by creating a place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully. It's a port of call, home away from home for diplomats, hustlers, entrepreneurs, and wanderers. Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night. It can be a dangerous place, but it's our last best hope for peace. This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations. The year is 2258. The name of the place is Babylon 5.
Hello and welcome to Chats, a television podcast, Season 6, Chatzylon 5. My name is Allen, and I messed up the first intro, so I'd like you to take the time to learn the Chatzylon 5 mantra. Magellan is always right. I will listen to Magellan. I will not ignore Magellan's recommendations. Magellan is God, and if this ever happens again, Magellan will personally rip my lungs out. Hi.
Hey, Alan, I know that there's some things that are on your mind lately that you're worried about. Mm-hmm. But I got to tell you, whatever it is, it can't be that bad.
It's a two-pronged intro. We both call each other.
Yeah. I just had to.
These episodes are fucking great. Also, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing groovy. How are you, man?
I'm delightful. I've been having a good couple of days. I'm on a hot streak, so let's keep that streak going, baby.
Let's keep that streak going, baby.
This is the podcast where we watch 2 episodes of Babylon 5 a week, and this week we watched Season 1, Episode 17, Legacies.
No way.
Yes way. I would never lie to you.
No way.
I believe it.
Right.
We also watched Season 1, Episode 18, A Voice in the Wilderness, Part 1. Mm-hmm. First up is Legacies, which was written by Dicey Fontana, directed by Bruce Seth Green. It aired July 20th, 1994, and it takes place July of 2258. Magellan, what happened in Legacies?
In this episode, a Minbari war cruiser comes to Babylon 5 to display the body of a recently dead Minbari leader, while Ivanova and Talia, I always almost say Talia.
Because you have a student named Talia.
Yeah. While Ivanova and Talia battle for the fate of a young girl with newly discovered telepathic powers. Alan, what did you think of this episode? And which half was good and which half was bad?
Well, that's a little bit... Well, here's the thing.
Yeah, I know.
Here's the thing. Just to redress what you're speaking of, the Talia Ivanova stuff is mostly brought down by the fact that the actress playing Elisa Belden is like
not good.
Not really. It's like very bad, especially on a show where like there's a lot of great actors, and then you have this actress and she's young. Like I get that, but like goodness gracious, Grace Una. No call out here, but just like I don't know what it was. It felt like she's like reading from like in a student play or something.
Yeah.
It ends up bringing down that plotline because she's so important to it. And the thing is, I did like though how that plotline, gave Talia and Ivanova A, plenty of chances to hang out with each other, and B, sort of like a look into what their marriage would look like. Like, what if they had a kid together? And sort of the things that they would fight over in the way of like, Ivanova is clearly like the butch one in the relationship because she's the one who's like, I'm going to teach you how fucked up the world is. You need to understand that people are terrible. And Talia is the sort of like more motherly, like, you need to like understand that like your powers are good and sometimes people are just fine. Just because she had your other mom had a bad experience doesn't mean like you need to hate telepaths, but I'm just saying. And it becomes very clear very quickly that they're more like they're kind of fighting with each other using this girl as a conduit than
right. They're kind of hashing out whatever their baggage is around the Psi Corps, respectively.
Yeah. So it sounded like do you think that the performance brought down that plot line as well?
Yeah, I think so. Just because. So I don't know. Just because that character has to be in all the scenes of that plot, and it really, the performance is just so flat that it is distracting. And performances like that always make you wonder, is the writing always this bad? And it's just we don't notice because they know how to do it? Or was the writing also particularly bad for that character? Because it just, everything felt unnatural. And I needed to believe that character because Ivanova and Talia were battling out like the core conflict of their relationship over her. And it's hard to like be bought into that when that person's not selling it.
I think, part of it is it's just very hard, and there is a long history of teenagers in science fiction television and shows that are like ensemble casts just being awkward. Wesley Crusher notwithstanding. But like, it also works in a way for me because she kind of serves the role of the viewer, at least in terms of not understanding the full extent of what telepaths are like. Because she's asking all the questions and she's asking all the right people,
Yeah, I'm not taking issue with the role of the character. I think it's a little convenient that the episode where we need to read someone's mind to like solve it, we just have somebody who's kind of a loose cannon telepath to do it. It's a little whatever. It is what it is. But I think it's a perfectly fine plot, and it makes sense that this is what Talia and Ivanova are gonna clash over. And I really like the plot before she gained consciousness, when they're in the med bay, and Talia is basically saying she's got to go to Psi Corps. Ivanova says no, she committed a crime, so she's under my jurisdiction. And then Dr. Franklin says, well, actually, she's unconscious, so she's my patient, so leave.
Bye.
I really like that exchange between the three of them.
It's one of those good, like, everybody knows their role, not only on the ship but in the show, and they're just kind of like dictating it to each other, and it works. And also Dr. Franklin's just good. He's just good. But yeah, one of my favorite things about this plotline though is that she's asking different people on the ship about telepaths, and they're giving her the opportunity and like the sort of immunity to just ask questions. The sort of creepy one obviously is when she goes to Natoth, Jakar's aide, and she's like, you guys don't really have telepaths, but like, do you mind if I like peek into your brain? And like, it ends up working out. And she's like, okay, you can look inside. And she has a bad time.
Yeah.
She says Natoth's mind was, quote, cold, ugly, and alien, which is at first seems really interesting, as if we're like suggesting something sort of big, like what's going on inside. And we kind of are, but the show later, I think Delenn says like, oh, she did that because Narn brains are really, really different from human brains. And that's just like being dropped into the ocean and not knowing how to swim. Like, it's just scary to be inside of there, but and
it
also
doesn't mean that like she's evil or something.
No, it's even just like she also has like been part of a society that's been under attack for 1,000 years. Like, she just has a lot of crap going on in her head all the time.
Right.
She's got difficulties. So That one makes a lot of sense. And then the one that ends up being plot relevant to the A plot is she actually goes to Delenn and says, hey, well, Minbari have telepaths. I'm curious what that's like. And Delenn kind of gives her like this basic lecture of like, in our society, they don't get paid, but they work as a service to people. And it's kind of okay because we already have a caste system. So I guess like jobs don't have to work the same way. Mm-hmm. And as she's doing this, Elisa has a moment and gets like a flash and learns that she knows what's going on. She basically solves the A plot basically in this moment. She says, I know what happened to the body. And we find out that Delenn might not be 100% telling the truth.
Yeah, so this is the part of the episode that I was the most invested in.
Yeah.
Was what it's revealing. First, I mean, this girl side plot is giving us some interesting information about how different races are interacting with telepaths, because it's not something I'd thought about before, of if there are telepaths in other societies, and the fact that there aren't Narn telepaths. That's kind of a fun thought, but it's not the most urgent thing for me to know. It's just kind of a fun fact. Whereas the stuff with Delenn, where she's telling us more about how the Earth Minbari War is this event that's having a number of different consequences that we're slowly unraveling and taking apart. One of those consequences we've already examined with humans, and how they kind of, their view of the war is we were supposed to lose, and then they let us lose, or they surrendered in a way that didn't make any sense. So
Right.
We're really suspicious, and we kind of are like shamed as a result of this war. And on the other side of that, the Minbari are not super happy about what they did. It has caused a fracture in their society between the warriors and the priests. And so that's something that we explore more in this episode.
Yeah, I think the thing that comes out greatest out of both Legacies and Voice in the Wilderness is that like the Minbari are really complicated, and their whole situation has to right now center around like the aftermath of the war, because the person who died, I believe, if I can remember his name, was in the military caste when he died. This is sort of revealed as people start pointing fingers at Delenn. And she was good friends with him for a while, for their whole like childhood. And he was originally in the religious caste, but because of the war, they switched him. So, we learned that you can switch castes, for example, pretty easily if it has to happen. Bramner, by the way, is the dead guy's name. And he died in the war, and he didn't like that because he always felt like he was a religious person. So her plan was to go in during the sort of procession and take his body, cremate his body, and then scatter the ashes, and then they would blame it on a religious miracle so that they could say, oh, his death was truly religious, it's not a military funeral. And it's fascinating to compare that to, like, in the beginning of this episode, the sort of conflict from Sinclair and Garibaldi's end is, oh shit, Minbari are coming at us with guns out. What's going on? Should we be afraid? Delenn, do you know what's going on? And she's like, it's a military funeral. Like, they have to arm their ships to the teeth because that's how military things are like. And then she's like, hey, like, do Earthlings have a thing like that? And Garibaldi's like, we actually have like 5 distinct things for exactly that. Like, for military funerals, we have like the missing man's formation. We have like the gun ceremony. We actually are like really obsessed with death and war, like more than you guys are.
Yeah, so I guess we're cool now.
I guess this is fine. This isn't weird for me. But yeah, I think that's just a really fascinating motivation of like, you want to die for the right reasons because you want to die for what mattered to you, not for the sort of consequences of your life.
Yeah. And it just makes this guy's death this sort of moment where everybody's trying to posture or trying to forward their particular faction in a way that complicates our understanding of humans versus Minbari. Because in different moments in this episode, the allegiances rearrange such that at the beginning, there's a kind of animosity between Sinclair and this military guy, And it seems like the whole point of this military funeral happening on Babylon 5 is like a big middle finger to humans. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
But then over the course of the episode, it kind of becomes like the human warriors and the Minbari warriors think that the religious caste are full of shit and they're on the same page. And so that realignment is something that makes this world feel really complicated and lively in a way that captured my attention.
Yeah, this is exactly the kind of stuff I want. These like not only backstory for the other races and the Minbari specifically, who I find fascinating, but like how they relate back to humans. And we always go back to the theme song mentioning, humans and aliens. Like those differences and similarities are like essential, and that's a core of what the show is. So exploring that seems like a really good use of the show's time, in my opinion. It seems like in our opinion.
Yeah, I agree.
There is a decent amount of like beating around the bush, because as with any mystery plot, if you pick up on it early, then you're just watching the episode spin its wheels. You're like, all right, well, it's not that guy and it's not that guy. Like, I know who
Yeah, I mean, we knew it was
is.
Delenn pretty early, right?
Yeah, you have to figure like they didn't introduce anybody but the other dude, and he has a good reason to not have done it. So
yeah.
Although on the way there, Garibaldi suspects, I think based on some information he gets from like Ivanova, but he mentions maybe it's the fault of this group called the Carrion Eaters, who are apparently a whole race of people that live in the down below that look
eat dead bodies.
They just eat bodies, and they basically look like vulture people.
Yeah, kind of like a squid vulture.
Exactly. They got like funny flubby mouths and stuff. They're cool. I always love the sort of, because I think there's a word for them. I don't want to look up exactly what it is, but there's like a wiki term for the races that are on Babylon 5 that aren't in the like main alliance.
Yeah, I don't remember they had like a whole coalition in that one episode. I can't remember what they were called.
Yeah, but it's like the non-allied people.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and so it's not them. That's just the show kind of being like, maybe, no, okay. League of Non-Aligned Worlds. Is a pretty straightforward name. But yeah, so it's not them, and then they find out that it is, thanks to Elisa, that it's Delenn. Weird in the flashback how she like freezes time. She does like some clock stopper shit. And like her and all of her men just like go in, steal the body, and then walk out. And I'm like, wait, hold on, that power is amazing. Can we get some of that, please?
Yeah, like remember the movie where Delenn is like, check out my 20 rings that each have a separate power.
Right.
Anyway, we're never gonna see those again.
Yeah.
She can do crazy shit.
So yeah, this is presumably either one of those ring things or just like Minbari magic.
Yeah,
which is really interesting. There was a really dumb moment just in the back end of this episode, though, where when we still suspect that it's the guy, the cut to commercial is Sinclair walking into a dark room and being like, hello? And then just, like he gets like choked from behind, and it's like cut to commercial, and it's like the guy just goes, hey, it wasn't me, by the way. Like,
I'm just mad at you.
Yeah, I hate you, and
I'm just a meanie.
Well, he says he's in that dark room because he's like, this is the place no one would look. They would never go to your quarters because you would hide the body. It's like, nah, dude, stop.
Yeah, Garibaldi's like, actually, I was in here with Delenn.
Yeah, so get out of here.
So chill out, dude. I just want to talk about Garibaldi in this episode for a second, specifically with regard to the Carrion Eater alien. Because I think that like something we need to acknowledge about this show is that the space station is kind of like a fascist police state.
Yes.
And we're just supposed to be like, yeah, that's the good guy. Like Garibaldi goes to this alien without any evidence except, oh, you're the aliens that eat bodies. Therefore, you must have eaten this body. The alien says, no, I didn't.
I did not.
And Garibaldi says, okay, then I'll force you to have your stomach pumped.
He says,
all of the other ones of your race.
Right. Like, what? Excuse me, you do not have a warrant for that, Mr. Garibaldi.
Yeah, you don't have a warrant for my stomach, sir.
What's fascinating about that is the show clearly draws a line between like the Earth government and the powers that be on Babylon 5. Because it's like, no, Earth government, definitely fascist, controlled by psychics, horrible, unfair, they never help us, they never give us money, bad people.
Right. These like cops without, like, who watches The Watchmen?
Exactly.
Is the view of Psychor. Yeah.
Yeah, and all those people. But then it's like, no, but like the people on Babylon 5 are also very bad. Like we don't talk enough about the fact that the down below is just people who like are, because they said it before. They're like, oh, they didn't get it, found a way to leave, so we just kind of let them stay here. And it's like, are you guys doing a refugees thing now? Are we doing like you can't just have that and be like, they're the poor people, and then also have Garibaldi walking in and trying to strong arm them like a fucking cop jock.
Right. Right.
You kind of have to address one of those things. But it is weird because it's handled as like
Yeah, go ahead.
It's handled as like a C plot. It's handled as like, oh, anyways, not the carrion eaters. That was just a weird red herring.
Right. Yeah. Dr. Franklin is like, sorry, bro. Didn't find anything in their stomachs. Anyway, what are you going to do now?
Yeah. What's the next plan? Like,
yeah.
You were going to say?
No, that's what I was going to say.
Yeah. And then I think what's cool too is, so Delenn like tells, they're like, okay, somebody has to tell the guy who brought this body here what happened. You should probably tell him. Naroon is the guy's name, I think. And she's like, all right, I'll be an adult and tell him, which I appreciate. There's no like awkwardness of like, I don't wanna, because she like can do it. But not only can she do it, but she kind of strong arms him, because she's like, hey, so I did it. If you're part of what, the Star Riders, which like, hang on, Babylon 5, that's the coolest name for anything I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Can you please like make that a huge thing? Anyways, Mr. You and your Star Riders, if you don't agree with what I do and you don't let me cremate this guy's body and then not tell anyone, I mean, I'm threatening you by the authority of the Great Council, so like, good luck. And it's like, and he's like, yes, ma'am, and leaves the ship.
Yep. Oh, I loved that.
Oh my God, what? She can just do that.
Listen, my two favorite characters on this show are nostalgic for past loves Londo.
Specifically, yeah.
And Delenn in a back room with another Minbari exerting her authority on them.
It's scarier than any like mind powers, to be honest.
Yeah.
But she has that too. Like if she wanted to, she could be like, oh, I'll go in slow motion and like stab you in the back and then no one will see the knife wound. It'll be sick. But instead she's like, no. I'm not going to hurt you, but I could. So maybe shut your mouth and know your place. And you and your little riders of the stars can go have a good time. Bye. I cremated your dude's body. Bye-bye. You can leave now.
Yeah.
It's such a power play. It's super good.
It's also what I found really fascinating about Delenn in this plot is when she's found out by Garibaldi and Sinclair, she says, you guys, come on. I was going to tell them that like his body disappeared and like went into space or heaven or some shit. Yeah. And now you're making it really tough for me. She openly is admitting some of the religious stuff I say is BS.
Is complete nonsense. Yeah.
It's complete garbage that I made up. Which complicates Delenn because I think we've thought of her, even though we know that something's up with her and she's a mover and a shaker and has done some shady stuff. I think we've believed that she is genuine in her like religious convictions.
Right.
And now I'm, I don't know.
Well, it's what's fascinating is you have that, and my thought after that moment is like, man, it's really awesome that Delenn is on our side and is on the Babylon 5 side, because if she was a villain, she would be terrifying. And then as Elisa is leaving, she talks to Sinclair, and he's like, hey, did you like see anything else in Delenn's head? And she's like, now that I think about it, conveniently at the end of the episode, I did notice this recurring word in her head, chrysalis. Is that a word people use? And he's like, that's a word. Yeah, that's a word people use all the time. Yeah, it's like a cocoon. She's like, anyway, that's weird. It seemed like she wasn't happy about it. Bye. I'm like, I can never tell if I like or dislike the way that Babylon 5 hints at things, because sometimes it feels really hammy for them to just be like, here's a word to just kind of put it in your pocket.
Right.
But then
Or
sometimes
like,
it's like
hey,
hinting
let
at
me
it.
touch your face and show you the station blowing up. That'll happen one day. Anyway,
Right.
bye.
Anyways, bye
Yeah.
forever. People like
It's
to
stuff
leave.
like that.
Yeah, people love to leave the ship, and their last thing is they tell Sinclair something huge.
Yeah,
That's
but also nothing.
but with no context or information, and he has like he ends this just being like, okay, cool, chrysalis. I'll keep. He says it. He's like, huh, chrysalis, but like that's not information. That's only information for us in the future because we know that the season finale is called Chrysalis. But that's what I got. So that's probably gonna just be this season's sort of last thing. I'm just man, it feels like we're finally accelerating. You know what I mean?
Right. It seems like we're going somewhere because the way that Delenn is talking about this schism in Minbari society, that is going to erupt somehow, I would imagine.
Right. And the second episode gets more into like the problems in Minbari society from somebody who's on the ground there and like what they're noticing.
Right. And it gets into the parallel with schisms in Earth society around like pro-Earth and free Mars, and it seems like what this season is going towards is showing all the different ways in which like the peace project of Babylon 5 is being undone by the factionalism of these different alien groups.
Right.
Yeah.
It's coming to a really fascinating head, and I'm like excited to see it just because you know we keep hearing about this stuff and we're like, I guess that's gonna go somewhere eventually, and then now, especially in A Voice in the Wilderness, I'm like, oh my god, we're doing it. Like we're there. It's not like, you know, when we watch shows that we know are like several seasons long and people say things and then we get like a comment that's like, remember this thing, I always assume like we're not going to know about this for like 6 months. We're not going to hear about this until like season 4. But like, you know, Free Mars is coming up again. We heard about it like a week ago and it's already back.
Yeah.
So we're getting there. My last note though was I think in the JMS Speak stuff for this episode, which I only skimmed earlier, but he was unhappy. This is one of the ones where he was really annoyed by the order that it aired, because it aired right after Eyes, which is another Psychor episode, and he didn't want to have 2 Psychor things in a row, like two like big psychic plots, and then also he wanted it to come after Babylon Squared which is next week's episode, because there was like something in that explains something about this episode. Presumably, I'm gonna guess it's the Narn stuff.
What do you mean by the Narn stuff?
Like why the Narns have like really messed up heads, but maybe the description we got in this episode is good enough, and it's not that.
Okay.
You know what I mean? When Elisa sees the head, So it's up in the air, but we're gonna see it literally next week, so it's not like we're gonna have to keep a note of that forever.
Right.
But for now, let's check out some emails, and then we'll hop over to the part 2.
Okay, let's do it.
We have a 1.5 sized email from our buddy Dan, and then we have a short one. Well, it's also a 2-parter from a new listener.
The pipes are calling.
Oh, I guess this is a good time for me to announce this since I also haven't told you this yet. I emailed Dan after he sent in this first email about Grail and Eyes, and I was like, "Hey Dan, I want to read the books, and I want to do a segment on this podcast where I like check in about as I'm reading the books. How do I get them? Which ones should I read, and where do they fit in canonically exactly so that I don't mess anything up?" And he sent me like a gigantic email detailing every one of the books and the quality of it, how to get it, and where it fits.
Yes, sir.
Can you ask for better fans? I don't think you can, to be honest.
Better Dans, even.
You can't ask for any. They're honestly like top 3 Dans in my whole life.
Yeah.
So I mean,
there was one Dan that was a very important mentor to me in college. So sorry, Dan, but you're number 2. The number 2 Dan. But still pretty high Dan.
Hi, Dan. The first one, which I actually have coming in the mail right now from Amazon, is Voices. But that takes place after the season 2 episode 1, Points of Departure, so I'm not going to touch that yet.
Okay.
He said that one and the ones around it are kind of meh, but I don't care because I like these like goofy pulpy sci-fi books.
You're a baddie, which I've learned means you're sexy.
That I'm a bad boy?
No, a baddie. Oh, you know this word? A baddie?
Oh, not in that context.
It means like, ooh, you're a baddie. Like You're sexy.
I know people say like, oh, they bad, like, oh, she bad, that kind of thing.
Baddie. A villain. Nope, not this. A villain or criminal in a story. No.
That's not me.
A baddie is a bad girl who's always on fleek, slaying the game, according to Urban Dictionary.
Slaying the game.
Anyway, I teach high school, so.
So I'm cool.
Yeah.
All right, did you want to read the first email?
Yes, I would love to do that. Which one is the first email? The one at the top of the inbox?
No, so in chronological order, Grail Eyes.
So Dan's Grail Eyes email.
And then a quick Grail Eyes part 2. You can just attach because it's like 2 paragraphs, just those 2.
Great.
The middle one is the book's email.
Got it. Okay, cool. So this is an email from the aforementioned Dan, our very good buddy, about the episodes we watched last week, Grail and Eyes. Dan says, I've never had any particular dislike of Grail. It wouldn't be on my list of good episodes, but I have the general sense that I appreciated the episode more than most. As I recall, JMS wasn't a big fan of this episode himself, but I think that was more because of production issues he had with it. We didn't like it, right?
No, that's the one with the wizard and
yeah,
Jinxo. Yeah, no.
I know.
No.
This episode has one of the most egregious examples of an episode having multiple endings. You're right. I know you guys weren't big fans of the My Name is Thomas scene, but it telegraphed final shot in every way that a scene can say it, and when it faded to black, I expected to see credits. Instead, we get a cut to a ridiculous humor scene with Londo and Veer. Yep.
So bad!
Which we talked about. Overall, if the episode is good for anything, it's a reminder of some little world-building threads that have been hanging out there, like the fate of the previous Babylon stations, or Sinclair's search for the truth, or that the Vorlons are creepy and or scary, and they apparently like it that way. Eyes falls into this weird little group of episodes with one-word titles that happens here toward the end of Season 1, and none of the episodes are particularly memorable, and arguably not really necessary either. I do appreciate the show cashing in on the promise that Sinclair's decisions weren't sitting well back at Earthdome, and that there might be action taken against him. I think this is an episode that worked better back in the day when people were still skeptical about this show actually having a serialized story, and this episode was really the first big nod to the fans to assure them that there really is a bigger story unfolding now. That's an interesting contextualization. But here, fully in the age of serialized TV, I don't think that we need to be assured in this way by a show anymore. Compelling argument, Dan. The Ivanova stuff was good, and I'm glad to see Allen really staring hard at these dream sequences. Yes. Yeet. I don't think there's a single dream sequence in the show that's completely superfluous. There's always something important being suggested, though it's through visuals and metaphors, instead of just clubbing us over the head with a direct message. And you guys picked up on the Mars stuff. You guys might be developing an ear for these things.
Yummy.
Yeah, it comes up in the second episode we're talking about today.
Exactly.
I'm glad that the episode took some time to try to establish that Psy-Core isn't necessarily some evil monolith much in the way that Bester painted the picture, but I guess that Mr. Gray was also necessary to counterbalance Ari Ben-Zane going full-on cartoon bad guy. The show has done this a couple times at this point, and I didn't like it either time. Twice, a character's come aboard with a personal grudge and an axe to grind to the point where they behave TV stupidly, tanking their own agenda. It happened in Survivors and it happened here, and I'm pretty sure you can expect it to happen again. I think you guys will be fine splitting up the two-parter. I agree, although we'll talk.
Yeah.
And signing off on the cliffhanger. I don't think this particular two-parter has stakes all that high. Might be tougher to do with the two-parter that happens in Season 3. There's also an unofficial two-parter in Season 2. We'll figure that out when we get there. Then Dan says that the AV Club's coverage of Babylon 5 is hit and miss, and often wanders into spoiler territory, so watch out for that if you're reading those reviews. Just as a more personal note, my own rewatch has taken me into the second season now, with the show's first Hugo-winning episode under my belt, and I really feel for your frustration for when the show treadmills a bit, in that it shows moments of greatness, then just runs in place for a while. My viewing has now taken me past the point where I initially thought, okay, the show is good, and I really just want to share the excitement with you guys for a moment. Good things are going to start coming at a more regular basis, and it's going to be sooner than you might think. Nice. And then there's a quick follow-up to that email from Dan, where he says he just remembers an odd little thing that gets said in the episode Grail. There's a point where Delenn mentions that the Minbari have two castes, warrior and religious, but that's not completely true. The Minbari have three castes, warrior, religious, and worker.
Ooh.
This could be just a bit of first season weirdness, where the world building isn't quite ironed out yet. But one could argue that the worker caste does often get ignored, particularly by the people of the warrior and religious castes. As is often true in real life, the worker caste consists of the largest group of people, but seems to have the smallest amount of power.
Snaps for Dan.
Beautiful stuff, Dan.
Yeah, I always love that he ends his emails like he doesn't say like bye anymore because he knows that they get read, but he does always end on like a really sharp sentence. I just think the previous one that says good things are going to start coming at a more regular basis and it's going to be sooner than you think is really a good thing to hear as we've been struggling with this show, and B, out of context, just a friendly thing to say to someone like, hey, good things are coming.
Yeah,
it's
don't
like,
worry,
oh,
buddy.
thank you.
Thanks, man.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate you, Dan. This is the good stuff.
Yeah, also that email had multiple endings, so just
true. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Our next and final email this week comes from Marcus, a new listener. I freaking love new listeners and when they send us comments.
Yay. It's my favorite thing.
Honestly, yeah, it's up there. Marcus says, hey guys, hi. I recently came across chats during my latest rewatch of Babylon 5 and have been really enjoying listening to your takes on these early episodes. Yes. Especially since you seem to be trying to avoid spoilers. Yeah, we're sometimes good at that. As others have said, much of what's being hinted at will get paid off, and it's fun hearing you sometimes make eerily spot-on predictions on where things will go. Don't think you've got it all figured out, because JMS has included many clever misdirects as well. He first came to Babylon 5 after reading about the striking similarities between it and Deep Space Nine. In case you weren't aware, there is something of a conspiracy theory about the origins of DS9, namely that after Paramount rejected B5 when JMS shopped it to them, they went on to incorporate large chunks of the premise into their Star Trek spinoff.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't know a lot about Deep Space Nine, but what I do know is, like, yeah, it's one ship, and they hang out on one ship. Like, hey, guys. JMS doesn't actually believe that any of the DS9 writers were in on this, and the shows both went on to go in largely different but equally incredible directions, but most fans agree that the parallels are too close to be a coincidence. And then speaking of Trek...
we'll have to do that show next, huh?
I guess well the thing with Deep Space Nine is you have to watch TNG to appreciate it, because it's like a follow up to TNG. It's not like completely something. I mean, TNG is like the best Star Trek show. All right, well, I'll go on this journey by myself then. Fine. He says, speaking of Trek, this week's episodes are notable for featuring. This is for last week, for featuring two legendary guest stars from Star Trek. David Warner, who played Aldous, the old guy in Grail, was the famous Cardassian agent who captured and tortured Picard in the TNG episode Chain of Command. That's the "There are four lights," that whole thing.
Oh, sure.
And then Jeffrey Combs, who played the uncommonly decent Psychor telepath in Eyes, Mr. Gray, was notable for playing multiple iconic characters in DS9, sometimes in the same episode. And he was also in the 80s classic horror movies, The Reanimator and From Beyond. I love Reanimator. Everybody should watch Reanimator on Halloween if you want. It's a very fun, very violent movie. Marcus follows up, I'm loving the podcast and have come to look forward to every Sunday. Keep up the good work. The best is yet to come.
Yay.
Sweetie. And then just another quick follow-up. To your point about how Grail would have worked better if it used the two random characters to give a ground-level outside perspective, there actually is an episode way out in season 5 that does that. A lot of fans don't like it, but I find it enjoyable, so it'll be curious to hear your thoughts when we get there.
All right.
I've been watching a new Gundam series recently, Gundam 00, and they have this whole plot line. Like, it's a show about like young boys in robots like fighting a war, basically. But they have this whole like B plot going through the whole series of this like kid and his girlfriend troubles, like in the war. And it's fascinating because it's just like, oh yeah, people still have girlfriend troubles in war. That doesn't go away.
Yeah.
And I just, that whole like boots on the ground stuff is always fascinating to me. But for now, Magellan, let's take it to a quick musical break, and we will be right back to discuss A Voice in the Wilderness, Part 1.
Welcome back to Chatzylon 5. The second episode we watched this week was Season 1, Episode 18, A Voice in the Wilderness, Part 1. Written by J. Michael Straczynski, directed by Janet Greek. It aired on July 20th, 1994, and it takes place in June of 2258. Alan, what happened in A Voice in the Wilderness, Part 1?
First of all, I want to come in the jump and say that I really appreciate that this show doesn't call its episodes like episode title, part 1, second episode title, because that was such a pain with Farscape when it's like liars, guns, and money, part 1. A few good things don't really bother anyone. It's like, I can't fit that on anything. In this episode, though, strange signals start coming from Epsilon 3, the planet below Babylon 5. A signed ship is sent to investigate, but is fired upon by a defense system on the planet. Meanwhile, Garibaldi worries about a lover he left back on Mars when fighting breaks out there. Magellan, what did you think of A Voice in the Wilderness, Part 1?
I think our common critique of the first part of a two-parter is always that no two-parter really needs to be 2 full episodes. It's probably just that it needs to be an episode and a half. And so the first part is always kind of going a little slow to get you to where the second episode needs to start.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to spend all of this time. But you know that it needs more time than one episode. And then it ends with Garibaldi saying, "What the hell?" That's it. So that's my review. There were parts of it that I am really intrigued to see where they go. The free Mars thing.
Love it.
This like old man who was just lying down in a gelatin spider web or whatever it was that he was in.
Yeah.
Like, who's this guy? Garibaldi's old love interest. You think that I would be sick of people's old love interests, but I'm hooked. What can I say?
Well, I love the man.
What can I say?
The thing that's cool about Lise Hampton is that's a little bit different from the other lovers is that her fate is tied up in the situation on Mars. Like, the reason we want to know about whether she's okay or not is because it helps us know more about like the conflict and what's happening to the civilians there. In addition to the fact that she doesn't seem like some random old flame. She is like the person that Garibaldi was in love with for a large period of his life. And they were going to be together before he went to be on Babylon 5.
Fair. Yeah.
So she feels a little bit more important as a result. And apparently, like, she's important. So I'm ready for that.
Yeah, you make a good point that the fact that her fate is connected to the fate of Mars makes both the individual Garibaldi love story and this story about what the heck is going on Mars, it makes them both seem more important because they're associated with one another.
Exactly. And, you know, it's kind of different from like Catherine Zakai, who's just like, I'm here, you used to like me, and now things are awkward, and I might come back, but like she doesn't feel like she matters. But Lise is like in a conflict that matters. Yeah,
that's a good point. Like, it's not somebody's just showing up and it's like, oh, we got to deal with this same plot, awkward conversation. It's a slightly different approach. On the top, I mean, let's just talk about Garibaldi. Let's just cover all the moments here. I think the show didn't handle it the worst it could have. The scene where Talia goes, you know, every time I go to the elevator, he's in there. Open the door. Hey, close the door. I'm going to take the stairs. And Sinclair says, yeah, me too.
Me too. So, sorry to cut you off. That moment to me felt very meta because he has literally interrupted her on the elevator like 3 times in the show so far.
Yeah, it's been a running thing that Dax has been tracking for us, right?
Yep. Or love in an elevator in general, yeah.
Yeah.
Second brief thing, that is the first of 2 moments in this episode where Sinclair gets the like really unnecessary comedic like stinger at the end of a scene. I'll remember to talk about the second one, but him being like, me too, is just like, oh, Sinclair.
Yeah, he's not really that character
No, exactly. He's not the
who
the
can do
quippy
that.
one.
Is the other time, can we just say it now? Is the other time when they're in, like, there's all that technology around,
Yes.
and Ivanova randomly goes, I need to pee, and he goes, tell me about it?
Yeah, tell me about it. Like, what?
Like, what the fuck?
So
Neither of those lines was necessary. Also, okay, I'll get back to Garibaldi in a second. This episode kept trying to, like, throw jokes in a way that didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Because the C plot is this weird sitcom where Delenn has, like, her old lover visiting, and she brings
He's not
him
a
to
lover
visit.
Though. He's more of like an old
An
grandpa.
old mentor, but there's something going on
Yes,
there.
yes.
And she brings him to visit Londo, and then they have, like, such a stilted comedic scene where they're like, Dylan's like, hey, this is my mentor. Londo says, hey, nice to meet you. Oh, nice to meet you too. And then whoever was writing that scene, Michael Straczynski, I guess, goes, damn. I really thought these characters had things to say to each other. I really thought if we just put these people in a room together, they'd make a scene happen. I guess not. Well, what can they talk about? I suppose Londo could just start singing the Hokey Pokey.
And talking about how weird it is that kids still learn the Hokey Pokey 1,000 years later.
Right.
Dude, because that scene is almost like... it's really well written up until that moment. Because it's like, hey, Londo, nice to meet you. Here's my old friend. And he, like... It feels like a conversation I've seen in my real life where, like, my parents bring somebody over and they're like, hey, this is our friend. And, like, I have to, like, pretend to be an adult and talk to them. And like, ignore what I'm doing. But, like, I can't get past the fact that, like, I was really invested in the shit that I just cared about. Like... They come in and I'm like, oh, come in. Like, can I get you a drink? Like, nice to see you. Oh, that's really cool. You're from Minbari. Have you guys noticed that the Hokey Pokey is really weird? And they're like, what? And they're like, no, guys. Like, people have been learning it for years. I read, like, thousands of books about it in the last 5 minutes. It's crazy that people sing this weird song. I'm now going to sing it for you. Are you ready? Here it goes. So you blah blah blah, and then Delenn's like, you were busy. You didn't need to have company right now. You were not ready.
Yeah.
I love Londo.
The one thing about that scene that I appreciate is that what they default to talking about is the situation with Free Mars and with, like, the Earth First movement, or the Earth. What are they called? The Home Guard.
I think you're right.
Yeah. They talk politics at first, and as aliens, the conversation that they're having is, we don't really get this. We don't get why humans are acting this way, because we don't understand the history or the context of human society. And I thought that was a fascinating moment that then was totally undercut by this silly Hokey Pokey thing.
Yeah. Because a lot of this episode and the Delenn walking around with her friend is, like, giving us a little insight in, like, what these people think of the conflict that's going on and all this human stuff.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the first scenes is Londo is in, like, a meeting. I can't remember if it's actually in this one or the first one, but he's in a meeting, and it's like him and Delenn and, like, Sinclair and Garibaldi, but, like, Jakar is not there. And he's like, oh, it's so great to, like, actually be able to have, like, an adult conversation when, like, somebody who we don't want to mention isn't around. And they're like, but, like, we're all people. Like, I don't know why we have to be against Jakar. And he's like, no. Like, it's in the stats. And then he has that great line, like, why do you hate the Jakar so much? And he goes, here we are, victims of mathematics. Like, the stats say that I have to hate him because his people have been trying to kill me forever. Why would I ever have a reason to trust him? And it's like,
right.
You're getting at something, but then sometimes the show is extremely dumb.
Right. I just think that what it did for me, that moment where they're just trying to figure out the Free Mars thing, is it helped me to understand that, when we hear about the Minbari, the different castes, like warrior caste, religious caste thing,
yeah,
we can kind of understand it from this abstract literary perspective of, I've read books like that, or I've read histories of certain societies that worked in that way. But I think on a basic level, I see it as a conflict that doesn't need to happen because it's this arbitrary construction of who's religious, who's a warrior, who's a worker, right? And so what this is demonstrating is that those same fissures that are in human society around the planet that you were born on, that's also an arbitrary distinction between peoples, that if you just take enough steps back, it is incomprehensible why there would be so much conflict over this.
Exactly. It feels like maybe one of the big pushes of the show is sort of solidifying this idea for us that all of this conflict is self-inflicted. And if we really think about it and we really zoom out, then we're just fighting over scraps. Like all of this rebellion stuff is like worthwhile, and it's how we get to a new world and it's how we improve. But like we're all just trying. We're all very similar, and we're fighting over very petty bits of dust that it's going to be gone in 100 years anyways.
Yeah.
So I'm into that stuff, and it's fascinating too that like this is because we talk about all the comedy stuff. Like JMS wrote this episode,
Right.
Or at least he's credited as the main writer. It seems like although he has a really great grasp of the themes of the show and where he wants the characters to go, he's writing a funnier show than anyone else is.
Agreed.
Because this is, you remember also, like, I loved Dr. Tasaki and his little gang of, like, science people, because they're like, hey, we found bad things on there. What are we going to do? We should do it again. We should definitely go onto this planet again. And Ivanova like, that's a bad idea. But, like, when they first get knocked out, she goes like, I'll pick you up in, like, the next 20 minutes. And then we get to the shot before the theme song is him being like, all right, who's got cards? It's like, you didn't have to do that. It works. I don't think it's bad. I think it's good writing to be like, these guys are bored and they've been hanging out for a while and this isn't actually scary to them. This is a routine.
Right, but you're right that it's a move that no other writer on this staff is making.
Exactly. It feels out of a different show. But I like this version of the show more.
And I wonder if that's just like, he's the creator of the show, and so he feels like he has license to do that. Like, I know if I were on the writing staff for a science fiction show that is created by somebody else, my scripts would be like reverent towards the themes of the show and would be serious and grounded, because like I don't want to make somebody else's show a stupid joke fest.
Exactly.
But for JMS, it's like, no, there's got to be a little, I'm trying to laugh here, you guys.
Yeah, there's lightness to this storyline. I set it up for you guys to do it. You can have fun with it.
Yeah.
So I really hope in the future, as these writers become more confident writing for these characters, that they can bring that lightness. Because honestly, this is a tone I prefer. I think like Babylon 5
when it works.
When it works, exactly. It doesn't always work. Sometimes the humor feels very forced, like the I have to pee moment, or I have to use the bathroom. But like this and like Londo's song, which is the best thing in the world, and all of that stuff, and Londo, period, ever, all the time, is good stuff. And it's stuff I kind of want to see them play with more.
I mean, the moment, and getting back to Garibaldi here, the moment where the comedy works the way that it should, in my opinion, is Garibaldi is like, he's in his head, he's troubled about this woman that he used to know and whether or not she's safe. So he goes to the bar and he gets his glass of water, and Londo shows up, and they have an exchange that's, one of my favorites of the show so far, where Londo, first of all, is like, oh, water. I try to stay away from this stuff. He sees that doesn't work, so he tries a different joke. He tells a story. He's like, Garibaldi, listen, dude, I used to go to a lot of strip clubs, like all the time. Garibaldi says, sure, okay. Thanks for telling me that. And then Londo says, and listen, I was at this one club one time, and this lady was there, and she had big boobs, and I'm miming them for you. Gross. Thanks, Londo. And then he says, and he looked at me, or she looked at me, and I was really sad, and she was like, hey, whatever it is, it can't be that bad. And then she
But he
kissed
delivers
me
it
on
so
the
well.
forehead. Yeah, he really sells it in such a fun way. It can't be that bad. And Garibaldi, and then there's a kind of, it's the moment where Garibaldi's like, if you kiss me, I'll break your arm off or whatever.
And it's
like, all right.
Yeah, it's portrayed as like, oh, that's funny. Anyone would say that. And it's like, yeah. But
Yeah, it's not the worst thing ever, but it's,
it's not the best capper on that scene.
Yeah, well, but that's not the end of the scene, because then Garibaldi says, "Well, what's up? What happened with that lady?" And Lando says, "Oh, we got married." I married her. Garibaldi's like, "Yeah, cool, dude. That's great. Yeah. She was sleeping next to me, and I'd rather cut my arm off than wake her up." Garibaldi's like, "Oh, that's so nice." And Lando says, "No." Does an impression of her. She had a voice that could curdle blood, or whatever he says. Anyway, I just really like that whole exchange. And then the real capper is that Lando's like, buddy, everything's gonna be okay. And he leaves, and the bartender's like, someone's got
to pay for that drink.
Pay for his drink. Yeah.
I in my head I like mouthed it during that part, but I thought Garibaldi for some reason was gonna be like, Landa, scream upward or whatever. Yeah. So there's a lot of good stuff, and I think honestly, you can only have moments like that because you have the time to stretch out.
True. Yes, that's true.
But it works. It works very well.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
What were your other big takeaways from this episode?
I mean, I think the Garibaldi stuff, we'll see where it goes. I like that we're getting a different angle on his relationship with Talia. We were sort of reminded, oh, he's lecherous and gross. And then the episode says, but it's not about that right now. We're going to show a softer side of him, which I'd rather see than him being pervy.
Right.
Just because it's more enjoyable to watch that. So we'll see where that goes. The Mars stuff, we'll see where it goes. I don't think there was anything else to Delenn except that her bearded friend was there, right? Or is
I like him.
Whatever.
His whole
he's gonna die, right? Probably.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I like about him is that we learn what's going on Minbari, because he's like, yeah, nobody has any motivation to do anything, and everyone's very like aimless and depressed because like
self-interested.
And self-interested, right? People have nothing to do except work for themselves, which is like very fascinating.
And what is his reasoning for that? It's related to the war, also.
Oh, what do you mean? What is the reason for everyone being sad like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just like a lot of people were switched out of their cast unfairly, and I don't know, like and this is getting into like stuff I've read about the Minbari and stuff that Delenn just kind of drops, but like the Minbari are all about self-sacrifice. Like she talks about the telepaths don't work for money; they work because you help other people. And when you have nothing to sacrifice yourself for after a war, then it's like, well, I guess I'm just gonna hang out.
Right.
So that's kind of where, like, they're sort of a motivated country without anything to do with that motivation. Or what, not country, planet. So I found that stuff really interesting. Yeah, and Drall is probably going to die, but his sort of, like, gives us a little telescopic view into the Minbari that I think is great.
Right.
I think Dylan has this line, and I can't remember the exact context of it, but they're talking about cynicism and... it's either with her friend or with like Lando or something, but she says, and this is a great long line here. Without the hope that things will get better, that our inheritors will know a world that is fuller and richer than our own, life is pointless, and evolution is vastly overrated. Like she just has, and it's like in her character, but she just drops these like fire lines, and you're like, Delenn, shit.
Yeah.
Just making me think about it, like real heavy stuff, and I love it.
She also had a great line that we didn't talk about in the last episode, where Sinclair and the Minbari warrior guy are fighting. And the way she breaks it up is she's like, in my experience, the only people who care about old battles are historians. Don't you agree? And they're like, damn. All right, Delenn, you got us.
I pretty much only have stray notes from here because like they're wondering what's on the planet. It keeps attacking people that land on it. I thought it was great because it's really important that they know what's going on with Epsilon 3. They can't ignore this because, hey, guys, this is the planet that Babylon 5 is always orbiting.
Yeah.
Like, it's very important that we know what's happening on here. Finally, the reason... I was at first questioning, like, why the hell are Garibaldi and Ivanova the ones going... not Garibaldi. Sinclair and Ivanova going down. And they say it because they're like, if this is a first contact thing, we can't trust anyone else to do this. They've talked in previous episodes about protocol for first contact. Like, if it's a new alien, it has to be the boss. Not just for like Star Trek reasons of like, well, Kirk has to go on the ship because he's the main character. It's like, no. I have to be there because this might be important. Yeah. So the Lise Hampton stuff just basically spins its wheels because he begs Talia to ask the Psi Corps people to like give him information because they have a base on Mars. They decline it because obviously like he could be lying, I guess. Liked that bit of dialogue between her.
They're saying like it could be a scheme. And Talia calls him paranoid.
Yeah.
And they say, well,
wouldn't you be paranoid? There's a war going on
down the road. So
exactly.
Yeah.
And there's all this cute stuff. And I thought it was, also the bar scene, the note here was, I find it fascinating that Londo has such a capacity for empathy with his companion in misery, especially considering his history with others. Like, he's always willing to be like, oh, Garibaldi, like, you seem sad, so I want to help you. Mm-hmm. But with G'Kar, it's like, no, fuck that guy, because he's too similar to him.
Right.
They're just the same. Why would you ever help someone who's like you? You would rather help someone who's like, what happens if you had a bad day? And it's like, no, I love Garibaldi. Mm-hmm. Sinclair sees a ghost man who keeps saying, help me. I thought that this was the Minbari stuff happening. And then Londo sees it too. Ivanova saw it and Londo both, they all saw it. And I'm like, okay, so he's just basically tweeting at people being like, hey, help me out. Help a brother out.
Right.
Finally.
And I guess we'll find out who that guy is.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell what race he was. He just looked like a crusty old man. I don't know.
Yeah, it seems like maybe he's different. I don't know.
Old race. And then we get this final scene, which really proves to me that like maybe Babylon 5 can totally do off-planet moments, because I thought this stuff all looked really great CG-wise. Like the landing
the big
sequence
shaft that they're in, it didn't look stupid.
No, and they're above this elevator. They have this elevator. Not elevator, it's like a long platform across a huge chasm that just looks like Tron.
Yeah.
And that part's cool, but what's even cooler is being in Garibaldi's position, getting a radio from Sinclair, where Sinclair's like, Garibaldi, you won't believe it. They have the whole future down here, dude. It's wild. It's sick. Check, you gotta see it. Mm-hmm. And they get down there, and then they see this huge machine, this great machine in the back, and they're like, what the hell is that? And the guy's like, help me, get me out, I'm gonna die. And then they do, presumably. And as we're about to end with that, a jump gate just opens. And of course, like you said, Garibaldi's like, what the hell is that? Cut. To be continued. Just a really hard, weird cut. Yep. Doesn't feel right.
Yep.
Either hang on it or give me one more line or something. It just feels weird. It's like not even a commercial break cut. But sure, we'll find out what it is, you know? That's what I have, Magellan. Did you have any other stray notes?
Nope.
Cool. Let's talk about what we're watching next week on Chatzylon 5.
Great. Next week on Chatzylon 5, we're watching 2 more episodes of Babylon 5 Season 1. The first is episode 19, A Voice in the Wilderness, Part 2. Remnants of, this is the same Amazon summary as last time, remnants of an ancient civilization found on the dead planet Babylon 5 orbits could lead to the station's destruction. Second of a 2-part episode. So we'll see where all that stuff goes. Then, it doesn't lead to the station's destruction because there are a couple more episodes. We have Season 1, Episode 20, Babylon Squared. Babylon 5's immediate predecessor, Babylon 4, suddenly reappears after mysteriously vanishing years ago.
I want that.
Okay.
I want that straight to the face, please. Thank you.
I'm ready.
I'm ready. And then after that, we're at the end of Season 1, baby.
And the final episode's called Chrysalis, so that word is going to matter in some way.
It is.
Yeah.
You know what else matters is that now it's time for the plug zone. You can follow Chats on Twitter at ChatsPod. That's ChatZPod. And you can also send us emails like our friends Dan and Marcus by going to chatspod@gmail.com and shooting us messages there. We love receiving those. You can rate us on iTunes as well, and please consider backing the Chats Patreon. That is how we get the show going. That pays to keep the lights on.
Yes, girl.
At $2 a month. Just $2 a month. You get commentary chats. Once a month, we record a commentary where we watch a movie. And if you're a backer right now, in November, we watched Face Off, which is a very fun movie, very silly. And we had a good time. I thought that was a good time, right, Magellan?
I could eat a peach for hours.
Just the computer being like, I could eat
a peach for hours.
It's good shit. If you want to understand what we're talking about, watch Face Off with us.
Movie's fucking nuts.
Yep. And then at $5 a month, you get Chats Nights, where we hang out and are friends with each other.
Oh, yeah.
Spicy stuff. That's going to do it for that. And since we don't do plugs like for ourselves normally, we do Chatsums.
Yes, we do.
Magellan, can you hit the kids with your Chatsum, please?
Here's my Chatsum for this week. If you're looking to read something to inspire you, if you're like kind of stuck in a rut, you want to create something, you want to do something, you should go read a series of letters. There are these 10 letters that were written by this poet named Rainer Maria Rilke. I don't know if you've ever read any Rilke, but he's a German poet from the turn of the century, or the turn of the century, so 18 to 1900s. I know there are a lot of centuries turning. That's the one. And basically, there was this young man named Franz Kappas, who was like a 19-year-old, who writes Rilke and is like, "Oh my God, Rilke, like your poems are amazing. Will you look at my stuff and tell me if it's good?" And then what follows is this correspondence between them in which Rilke is giving all this advice to this younger guy. And like the first letter is Rilke saying, "Listen, man, you're asking me if your stuff's good. It's not. It's not good.
Oh, boy.
And you have to stop asking people if it's good. You have to just go into yourself and be like, is this true to me? Do I really want to do this? Do I need to do this?" And then just do it, man. And either you'll make something that's good or you don't need to be a writer.
Wow.
And then they say more stuff. And it's really great. So I recommend checking that out.
What is this called again so I can look this up?
Letters to a Young Poet.
Letters to a Young Poet. Wow.
And they're like prints, they're books. I have a book version, but you can also easily find the text of it online.
Word. So then, my Chatsum for this week is actually an album that just came out today as of this recording. It's a musical album. So I've been a big fan of this guy, John Bellion, for about 4 years now. And he's sort of, I think he's kind of self-described himself as Jay Dilla, the deceased Beats producer who did a lot of work with Kanye West back in the day and Jay-Z. Mm-hmm. Jay Dilla meets Paul Simon, so he's very like,
oh my God.
Like emotional, personal, high-noted, beautiful voice kind of thing. And that's his whole shtick, and he just put out this new album, Glory Sound Prep, which is, even if you don't know if you're interested from the first song, it's short. It's 43 minutes. I think that actually works in its favor because it's a really consistent album that has like a good momentum to it. Mm-hmm. I listened to all of it at midnight, at the minute it dropped, because I'm obsessed, even though I had already heard like half of the singles already. Mm-hmm. And really, it's going to take you on a trip. I don't want to say a lot about like what it's about, because a lot of it is like just emotional. It's like, the first song, Conversations with My Wife, is like him talking about fame and success and like, in relationship to his partner. And that's cool. And, some of it's more hip hoppy and there's like straight up raps in the middle of it. But by the end, you feel like you have kind of developed a little bit of a friendship with him, and you know a lot about like where he's going and where he's been. And it kind of encompasses his career in a lot of ways. Cool. And then also, heads up, that last song is going to fuck you up. I'm just going to tell you that from now. It's super sad.
Cool.
It's 8 minutes long, and you'll understand why. It'll gut you. So you go through it, And you're like, oh, I love this guy. I love his family and I love his work. Oh.
Oh, and do they all die? Somebody dies?
Well, it's like about his grandmother, so, you can go from there. Check that out wherever you listen to music. It's available everywhere. And thank you for being available to listen to our podcast this week. Thank you so much for listening to Chatzylon 5. Peace.